But I do have my good friend Casey Crow here with me, so we're going to have Ask a Libertarian Day this afternoon. Yesterday morning, I was talking with Micah Caskey about the upcoming state legislature. We'll get into that too. You're along for the ride. All right, Thursday afternoon. Welcome into the program. It's the afternoon drive. Casey sitting in for Kev, and with me, my good friend Casey Crow. Hi, Casey.
Hey, Casey.
How are you?
I am wonderful. If I was any better, I'd be twins.
There you go. That's my line, too. If I was any better, there'd be two of me.
I'm telling you.
Yeah. Everybody should know the Grouch's Deli phone lines are open, 803-799-8255. That's 803-799-TALK. Casey and I are going to be on for the next 2 hours. We'll be glad to run in a little Ask a Libertarian show here with you guys. Yesterday morning, I got to sit in with Micah Caskey on the rep. So last week, I sat in with Chris Wooten on the rep. 9 to 10 every Wednesday morning, we have state representatives here on the point on the show, The Reps, and they talk about what's happening in the state legislature. And Micah was saying yesterday, like when the state legislature's out of session, it's like there's not a whole lot to talk about. And so last week, Chris was here by himself. I got to sit in with Chris. We spent the first half talking about, what's upcoming and what things they could look forward to. So he said last week that they'd been working on this judiciary reform and specifically on holding judges accountable for the way that they do their rulings. And they have a review committee that does exist. And every 6 years, every judge comes up for review. But somehow the way that committee is structured sort of needs to be redone or whatever. And Chris said, you were listening, Chris said, like, this is Micah's thing. He's really, he's really working hard on this, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so yesterday morning, I looked like the biggest jerk because I say to Micah, like, I hear this is your thing. And he starts laughing, like uproariously laughing. Apparently, he hates everything about this conversation and thinks it's unbelievable. I mean, I guess he must think it's just dumb because he was like, and then the other guy that was here, Brandon Ott from Calhoun, he was like, yeah, no, Micah hates everything about this. And I was like, well, I feel like a big jerk now. Oops. So the next time I see Chris Wooten, I got a knuckle sandwich for you, pal, to make me look like a moron. But
that's right.
Anyway, so I was a little curious if you have a take on that. If you do, we can talk a little about that. The other thing that Micah and I talked about yesterday was these pre-filed bills. And if you go out there, the SC legislation, it's a website called legiscan.com, legiscan.com. And it has, for South Carolina, 2023, 2024, 125th General Assembly, all the pre-filed bills. And there's like 1,000 of them. And these all go in before December 14th. And this is legislation that our elected representatives want to somehow tackle in the upcoming year. And so I was kind of excited about them. So I start reading through a few of them. Some of them are like, meh. Some of them are like, this could be cool, right? And then I get these two representatives in the room and I want to ask them about it. And the two of them are both like, yeah, there's a lot of pre-filed bills, and they're really cynical about how, like, none of them are ever going to see the light of day.
Yeah.
About how many of them are just chilling there and, like, nothing's ever going to come of any of them.
That's, that's really what happens is this is the time for them to just, like, throw everything against the wall and see what will stick and what will get traction. And I suspect that when you hear a politician campaign and say, I introduced 25 bills into legislation, which should be a bad thing, in my opinion.
Right.
When do they ever introduce bills that increase our freedom rather than take, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I would be happy paying our legislature to just sit at home and, like, watch Netflix. But
not only did I not introduce any bills, but I shot down about 85% of the ones that came in front of me.
Yes. Like, I could, like, if I got elected to the legislature, which would be amazing, I would just tape the little no button down on my desk and then just leave.
That one and the that was easy button.
Yeah.
No, that was easy. No, that was easy.
Yeah, that's right. We don't need it. We can't afford it. Like, this is not freedom.
Yeah.
No.
That's less freedom.
Yeah. So I suspect that part of it is that they are filing bills to say that, like, I filed these bills and I got co-sponsors and blah, 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 blah. And, it's really just it's like writing blog posts, basically. Yeah.
And so, so the one that I brought up to them, we talked about it on the air, was the school board benefits bill. The idea is to offer state benefits in terms of retirement and healthcare to school board members if they get elected to the school board. And my first question, which should have been your first question, but my first question was like, why would you do that? This is full-time benefits for part-time work, right? Like this doesn't even make any sense to me. This seems ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
And the response from one of them was, well, if you're going to offer benefits to every other elected official, you should offer them to all elected officials. And I thought, just don't offer it to any of them.
To any of them. That's right.
Like just zero. And then that response was, okay, but if you don't offer them anything, then why would they do this? Why would they run? And I thought, wow, we could unpack that in a whole hour. But that wasn't your first question. Your first question when I mentioned it was what?
Was, I don't even know.
You said, "Is
What did I
that
say?
small
Oh,
government?"
that's right. Yeah, is it small government? Yeah, Republicans are the small government guys, right? And I said, who introduced that? Was a Republican?
Yeah.
And yeah, it was. Like, yeah, of course, because small government, like modern day conservatism, is just progressivism in the slow lane.
Yeah.
Like, it's not small government. Nothing they do is
I
small
can't
government.
believe that's not the first thing I asked. I mean, that should have been the thing I said, but it
Yeah.
wasn't. Okay, so my question for you then, these school board benefits or the argument, let's put it out there. The
Yeah.
argument that if there are no benefits, there is no compensation, there is no, remuneration or whatever it is, right? Like whatever you call it.
Yeah.
Why would people run for office? Why would they give up their time and their service and their expertise if they're not going to be compensated in some way?
Yeah, I mean, civic duty. I mean, our legislators aren't really tremendously compensated for the time that they spend in the legislature.
Yeah, you're not
But
going to get rich being in the legislature,
right, not from the pay.
not from the pay.
And so why do they run, right? To make a difference, to make an impact. Why do people run for school board? Why do people run for, HOA? I mean, like them or not or whatever. People do put up their own time and run for HOA president and gardening club president and all that because nature abhors a vacuum. When there's a job that needs doing, there will always be people that step up and are willing to fill that hole and fill that role.
And here's the thing is that the people that are filling that, if the people who are doing that job right now are doing it poorly
Yeah.
or making your life miserable, making it harder for you to have liberty or to have prosperity in your family, in your life, then it's on you to step forward and go, look, man, this guy is not doing a great job. Either I'm going to step up or I'm going to find somebody around me that's willing to do it and I'm going to
Right.
help that person get elected.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with you. To me, civic duty is a strong enough argument. I don't think you need to also give me healthcare benefits. And I would say, too, that the idea of somebody getting healthcare benefits through their school board post would simply incentivize people to stay in that post for a lot longer than they belong there.
Yeah, I mean, then the conversation's going to be like, instead of going, okay, well, we used to not have benefits, but now we gave all these benefits. Now we need term limits, and it's like, no, take away the benefits.
Right.
You don't need to pass
Well,
term
if
limits.
you think the benefits are what incentivize people to go,
Yeah.
right, or to stay,
Right.
it definitely would incentivize people to stay. If you know that if you don't run for reelection, you're going to lose your health care. I mean, you're probably going to run for reelection, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it's just it's a conflict of interest.
And you don't even have to be good, right?
You just have to get elected,
You just have to get elected.
right? And
Like,
you're getting the benefit.
and when you make a decision that's bad, right? You bear no consequence for that.
Except if you get voted out.
Yeah, but
Right. And so that's what we have. We have the ability to vote you out. But if we vote you out, you lose your health care.
yeah.
Right. Like, so that's cruel. Why would we do that to you?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't even make any sense.
It's like it's almost like a welfare program,
Yeah.
basically.
I was fully stunned by it when I saw it. And then it was like, well, if we're offering it to some elected officials, we should offer it to all. And I was like, how about you just don't offer it to any?
To any.
How about that's just not even a thing? Like,
Yeah.
we just don't have state health care for, part-time employees. Like,
Right.
these are not employees. These are elected officials, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I just
And not only that, but like, we talked about how we were talking about the property tax conversation and like how to pay for it and all that other stuff. And of course, this is not small government, but think about the South Carolina schools are sitting on cumulative $2 billion. So if you want schools to be better, don't pretend like there's not money there, because there is,
Yeah.
and they're sitting on it and doing nothing with it.
Yeah.
So you could have, incentivized teachers and all this. Like if you're going to pay somebody more, like, we don't do public education in my house. It's just, it does not fit for my son, and that's cool. But for some people, like that's the best option for them. That's fine. And while we have it, our teachers should be awesome, and we should be recruiting the best teachers. And I think teachers are great. I think every day teachers go to school, to be clear. Teachers go to work every day to make a difference in the lives of their students, 100%.
right.
But if we've got money to burn, like, don't spend it on school board administrators, or spend it on,
Healthcare.
like,
It's
why?
for healthcare for the
Yeah.
school board guys. Come
Still, yeah,
on. Let's
it's ridiculous.
let's run to break. When we get to the other side, by the way, if you're interested in that school board member benefits thing, or if you want to call your legislator and tell them, don't even let this get out of committee, it's House Bill H4656. So
Tell-
if you're aware of that.
Tell you what, do a GoFundMe.
Yeah. All right. We're going to go to break. On the other side, Casey and I'll be right back with you with the afternoon drive. Don't go away. Kasie and Casey sitting in for Kev. It's Ask a Libertarian on a Thursday afternoon. Groucho's Deli phone lines are open, 803-799-8255. That's 803-799-TALK. If you give us a call and all you hear is it to go to the radio on your phone, that means I put you on hold. So don't hang up. We'll get to you eventually. But normally what ends up happening, if people haven't called in before, I don't get a chance to greet you when you first call because we'll have a couple of other callers in the way, and then I'll put you on hold. And sometimes people hang up because they didn't know that's how it goes. So what'll happen is you'll call me, and then you'll hear through your phone, you'll hear the radio on. And so what you want to do is turn your radio down and just listen through your phone until I say, hey, you're on the air. And then you'll go, is it me? And I go, yeah, man, tell us your name. So anyway, so we welcome new callers to the Groucho's Deli phone lines. As I said, 803-799-8255. That's 803-799-TALK. Kasie and Casey sit in for Kev. Okay, before we went, we were talking about some of these pre-files, but we've got something big coming up in January on 123 Day.
That's right.
Which is the ranked choice voting rally at the State House. So tell our listeners about that.
Yeah, so the Better Ballot SC, which is South Carolina's chapter, if you will, for the ranked choice voting initiative across the country, is going to be having an instant runoff voting rally at the State House on 1, 2, 3, right? Because you get to rank your candidates with ranked choice voting as 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. So 1, 2, 3 in 2024. So that's going to be happening at from 2 to 4 p.m. And it's going to be really awesome. We have a few people speaking, and one person that's speaking is the presidential candidate Chase Oliver, he's running for the nomination to be the Libertarian nominee for president. So we haven't done Libertarian Party hasn't picked a candidate yet, but he's in vying for that nomination.
That's
and he'll be there speaking. He's a huge proponent of ranked choice voting, and he has some great experience with that because he ran for Senate recently in the last election. I think it was 2022.
And against Warnock and
Walker.
That's right. In Georgia.
So he ran against the Republican and the Democrat, and in Georgia he ran as a Libertarian, and he caused a runoff election in that state. And Warnock eventually won the seat, and Walker wasn't able to unseat him. But it's that cost taxpayers like $1.5 million to have everybody come back to the polls and vote again.
And of course, not everybody goes on the second time around.
That's
so
right.
You're not all being represented because sometimes people can't get off work, things like that.
That's right.
It's usually some like random day. Yeah, it's a lot harder to vote the second time.
Yeah.
But instant runoff voting fixes that.
It does. Yeah. So how it works essentially is you go into the poll, into the ballot box, and you rank your choices from first place, second place, third place, or preference, however you want to call it. And so if you pick, guy A or lady B or whatever, if that person doesn't get enough votes to win the election, then their votes get transferred to the next person. So your vote still counts. In fact, it counts multiple times. And sometimes some elections can be 1, 2, 3, 4 rounds deep before your candidate gets actually selected, your choice. But the beauty of it is this idea of a wasted vote is gone now because look, I like I'm going to go in and vote for the Libertarian because I like them, I believe in them, and that's what I'm about. But let's be honest, they're probably going to have a more difficult time winning the seat. So if I have a second person behind that, which I can't imagine that would happen, but let's say I really like maybe an independent or something, and I rank them as position 2 or whatever, that means that my vote for the first Libertarian, my first choice, isn't wasted. I get to use it, and then if it doesn't work, I get to use my vote again.
So I think the reason Libertarians, the Green Party, the Constitution Party, all these other third parties and smaller parties are behind this is because a lot of times people are afraid to vote for a third party candidate because they are afraid that they're throwing their vote away.
Right.
And I mean, let us be clear, because we've said this 1,000 times. If you're voting for the candidate you want, you are never throwing your vote away.
That's right.
Like at the end of the day, you need to be voting for the person that you think is best going to represent you, whether they're going to win or not, right?
That's right.
But the duopoly makes the argument that, wouldn't you rather have this than that? Vote for the lesser of two evils and all these other sort of toxic, I mean, they're like abusive relationship justification conversations.
So manipulative.
It's so manipulative.
Yeah.
So if you're out there and you're thinking, I would vote Libertarian, but I don't want to, quote, waste my vote, end quote, then you go, okay, well, in a ranked choice voting scenario, you can give your first vote to the Libertarian. And in that first round, if nobody gets the majority of votes, then the bottom candidate is dropped and
Right.
their votes are given to the second place votes from those voters. If still nobody gets 50%, then the bottom candidate is dropped and those votes are given. So what ends up happening is over the course of this instant runoff over
Hmm.
and over and over again,
Right.
you finally get to somebody having a majority, even if that majority is made up of being people's third and fourth choice,
That's right.
which it's not great, but it still means that you didn't waste your vote, right?
Yep.
And so it mathematically it feels a lot more. I shouldn't say math doesn't really feel, but I should say it looks more fair
Yeah.
in terms of being represented by the person who does finally get elected as opposed to a winner take all. More than anything, though, the reason I think libertarians are behind it, not because of this third party scenario, but because it does reduce the the burden on the taxpayer
Right.
to pay for multiple elections.
Yep.
And it does prevent that low turnout in the subsequent election, which usually ends up favoring specific candidates, right? So when we look at things like we just want to make it better in general,
Yeah.
this is a better alternative.
Yeah, it definitely favors the incumbent because if you are somebody who wants to vote to unseat somebody, like in the Georgia case, I mean, it was like 49, 49, 2%, something like that.
Right.
And that race, by the way, they spent $1 billion on campaign money on
Right.
that. Chase spent, I think he spent $13,000.
But a lot
But
of the people who were going out there to unseat their incumbent,
right,
right? Raphael Warnock, right?
yeah, he was the
Yeah.
incumbent. Yep.
The people that wanted to unseat him, they didn't really like Herschel Walker that much.
Nope.
They just didn't want Warnock in there. And so the second time around, they were less motivated to come out and vote.
That's right.
And so, like you said, it benefits the incumbent.
Yeah. So this gives you. I mean, it's like risk free, right? It's like when you're playing blackjack, and you get insurance. It's like vote insurance. It's amazing, and I think that ranked choice voting, along with none of the above as an option, would transform American politics like wholesale.
If we could get NOTA, none of the above, on the ballot, I
Yeah.
would even take that ahead of ranked choice
Oh
voting.
yeah.
I mean, if that was an alternative, like, hey, well, we're out there, we don't think this ranked choice voting thing's going to work out.
Right.
That's never going to fly, blah, blah, blah. It's cool. Why not let somebody pre-file election reform that just throws none of the above there?
That's what I'm talking
Like,
about.
I would 100% get behind that.
I write it in when I can.
Yeah, well, we write in our neighbor. We've tried to elect Kathy Lacey for all kinds of things. she's unaware. All right, it's Kasie and Casey sitting in for Kev. We're doing Ask a Libertarian today. Groucho's Deli phone lines are open, 803-799-8255. We'll be right back on the other side of the break. Don't go away. It's the afternoon drive. Thursday afternoon, Kasie and Casey sitting in for Kev. We're already a half hour into this program. I'm kind of excited. Like, this time flies by when you and I get to hang out on the air.
It does. And when we don't get to hang on.
Yeah, it does just fly right by.
It does.
We just flew a whole year right by, 2023.
I'm still in the beginning of 2020. I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't
This
look.
2023 stuff.
So we have the same like New Year's hats and crowns and little blow toys and all that we've been using for like years, right? And I just bag them up and I pull them out every year. And Holly's been wearing the same 2019 hat for like the last 4 years. And this year we were cracking up about it because she was like, I feel like COVID is like a fever dream. Like I have no idea what's happened since like 2019. And New Year's Eve we went to pull the stuff out and I was like, here's why. Because we keep putting this 2019 hat on you and you keep going back in time.
I feel like I was in a coma or something,
I mean, I think we all missed out on a good little bit during COVID, but yeah, there's absolutely that. All right, we got a call on the Groucho's Deli phone line, so we're going to go to the phones. Welcome into the program, caller. What's your name?
Hey, y'all, this is David.
Hey, David.
Hey, David.
On this ranked choice voting, there's probably a guy in Maine who's not a big fan of it. I think you know what I'm talking about. The way that system works, it's almost better to not get 50% of the votes because if you get, for example, he got like 46.5% of the vote, and he ended up losing because of the system y'all talk about, where it kept rewarding the person who came below him, to where that person who received less votes than him got the election because the lesser candidate's votes got added to his votes, and he ended up winning even though he got less votes.
But what that means, but David, what that means is that guy who got 46% of the vote was not even the second choice for those other voters.
Right.
He wasn't even the third choice for those other voters, which means there were people who really did not want that guy in office.
Right. And we get the same thing with primaries, the way we vote for primaries, because you have like 4 people running. and you're dividing all those votes up.
Yeah.
And it's not the person who gets 51% in a primary. It's the person who gets the most.
Right.
Which even if you get 25%, there's 75% of the people who don't want that candidate.
Right.
In primaries, you actually get the opposite of what the popular vote wants.
Yeah.
Right. But you know the notion of one person, one vote. So this idea of like, well, I'm going to vote for 3 people, that's just insane. I mean, it goes against everything. You're supposed to pick. You can't. It's like saying, well, I kind of believe what the Democrats think, and I kind of believe what the Republicans think. So I'm gonna vote half for the Republican and half for the Democrat. I mean, you can't do that.
You're not splitting. You're not splitting your vote up. You're giving it priority. And if there is not a plurality, then you're saving yourself a trip back to the polls. It's no different than what we're doing now. You'd
have to go back to the polls anyway.
Your vote up.
Yeah.
No. You're splitting your vote up.
No.
If voted for more than one person.
But if that,
right?
You rank them.
Okay, so think about this in terms of the senator's race, right? In the race for Senate in Georgia, if I had voted for Chase, right, and then there was a runoff, right, after the election, and Chase didn't make it to the runoff because he didn't get enough points, right? He didn't get enough votes. Now they're going to do a runoff between Warnock and Walker,
yep.
Right? And me, as a libertarian, I have to now choose between those two. So I'm going to get to vote again in a runoff, right? Except I'm not going to because they don't represent what I want. So I don't even show up.
Right.
Which means in that runoff that happens, like even if I had a second choice or a third choice, that my vote doesn't go anywhere. My vote was canceled out in the very first election.
That's right.
So my vote doesn't count at all.
Like I said, I see it as you are splitting your vote because you're voting for more than one entity. You're taking one vote and actually splitting part of this one, part of that one, part of that one. And to me, it just makes no sense. I mean, when the person had the most votes of anyone in an election, they should win. That's just the way I see it.
Okay.
It's like, oh, well, he got a lot of second place votes, which means, well, no one really wanted him for first place, but a lot of people wanted him for second place.
Yes.
Well, he gets to win that. It just means insane.
But the guy that got the 46%, had he been other people's second place choice or third place choice, he would have won. And I say this because here's the thing. What happens in an election like we have right now is that he doesn't even bother to talk to people who aren't going to vote Republican.
Right.
Like the Republican candidates are not trying to get Democrats to vote for them. They're not trying, they might be going for independents. Maybe they're talking to libertarians, but for the most part, they're like, hey, I'm a Republican. I know I'm going to win. People are going to go in, they're going to vote Republican straight ticket, and I'm going to win. And so they don't even bother to listen to the other side or to try to think about what other constituents might want.
It should also be noted that we've been doing this for people in the military that are deployed for years and years.
They've been doing ranked choice voting on their absentee ballots for years.
That's right.
Because they can't make it back. I mean,
that's right.
Let's be honest, because they can't come back here. So I mean, it's a violation of one person, one vote.
If it's good enough for, it's not okay. That's not what it is, but that's okay.
We'll have to agree to disagree.
Yeah, we understand. Well, thank you for calling, David.
Yeah, good to talk to you, David.
I don't know. I mean, I think people do have a sense that it doesn't mathematically make sense for them. I understand that. Like, I can see that.
Yeah.
And we spent some time with Nicole, who is the president of the Better Ballot SC. She spends a lot of time talking about how this works and why it works and that kind of thing. And right now, in our legislation, they're not looking at it for big statewide elections. They're looking at it for local elections, things like school board, where you have multiple candidates. Yeah. And so it's really more about those municipal elections where you're going to have multiple candidates. We have another caller. Let's bring him on the line. Hey, caller, welcome to the program. You're on with Kasie and Casey. What's your name?
Will.
Hi, Will.
Hi, Will.
How's it going? I was just listening to you, and I caught the last guy, and I don't think he really understood. He keeps thinking that it's plural votes, and it's not plural votes. It's one vote. What you're doing is you're casting your secondary vote just in case it doesn't turn out the way you think it will.
Right.
It's not. You're not splitting the vote. You're not going, oh, this one gets this. No, you're going, okay, if my candidate doesn't win, and we have to do another election again, but my candidate's not going to be, who would I choose?
Right.
So that my vote can be used. It's not a double vote.
Right.
You're not voting twice. You're voting one time.
It's like,
and I think that's where he's not thinking about it.
Yeah. I think you're right, Will. It's about allocation, how the vote actually gets allocated. It goes to which candidate at what time during the election process.
Yeah.
Same vote. It's just a matter of where it gets allocated.
It's like when when your wife's going to the grocery store and she's like, hey, do you want ice cream? Yes. If they have chocolate, get me chocolate. If not, get me vanilla. If not, get me strawberry. You're not getting You're not getting 3 pints of ice cream. You're getting one in that order.
And if she comes home with no ice cream at all, how bummed would you be?
I would be bummed.
The
Okay.
Well,
people
I
who said
didn't
that
know
in
they didn't even have
1980.
strawberry. I don't know what you wanted after the strawberry.
Right.
You got nothing. Thank you for calling, Will.
Yeah. Thanks, Will.
No problem.
I think like it is kind of complicated. It is a little bit like people who aren't as familiar with it don't really understand it, and they're a little concerned about how would it work and would it be fair.
Yeah.
And then two, you have to trust the balloting systems, and there's a lot of conversation around like how do the ballots work, what do they look like, do people push the right button, and this
Yeah.
kind of thing. And that it does take a little bit of training. We've been doing some ranking on a lot of other things and a
Mhm.
lot of other places. So like there's a star ranking system too, where you can go like 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars. That's kind of similar
It's
when we
like
think
approval
about
voting, I think.
yeah, like
Yeah.
we're and so there's other ways to do it. It's just I think the big question about IRV, which is instant runoff voting
That's right.
or ranked choice voting or better ballot SC, all these names are all synonymous. I think the big conversation about it is like let's just talk about it. Like
Yeah.
let's just talk about ways to make voting more representative and more fair. And if we're not willing to try anything, then we're just going to keep getting what we've always got, which is clearly this very two-sided system.
Yeah, and when you introduce ranked choice voting, you make it so that candidates have to bridge the gap between because if I'm smart, I'm gonna be going if I'm in first place or maybe I'm in second place or something like that. I'm gonna build coalitions with other politicians and shake hands and go, hey, we're running different campaigns, we believe different things, but I respect you and all that stuff. And when their candidate loses, I might pick those voters up because I've earned it, right?
Well, if there's some issues that you have in common too, and then you have to pay a little bit
Yes.
more attention to the electorate and say, why did you choose that candidate? Why were
Yeah.
you out there voting for Chase Oliver instead of voting for me, Herschel Walker, right? Like,
Right.
what was the purpose? Like, what is Chase doing that makes you excited? Can I bring those issues into Congress with me if I get elected?
Yeah.
And if I can, if that's part of my platform, I can build that into my platform, then I'm going to pull those voters. But I mean, those politicians were asking Chase just to endorse them, and he was like, no.
Yep. That was
He
that
was
was
like,
beautiful after.
absolutely not. I'm just
Yeah.
going to tell my people don't even bother.
That's
Like
right.
this system is not it's not set up for you. So anyway, if you want to learn more about ranked choice voting, if you want to get involved, if you want to see kind of where it stands as far as the South Carolina State House is concerned, on January 23rd, which is 123, there's a rally at the State House from 2 to 4 p.m. Casey and I will both be out there. We'll be there with Nicole from Better Ballot SC, Chase Oliver, our one of our candidates for presidential nomination from the Libertarian Party. He's going to be there. There's going to be a bunch of people out there. Last year's coalition was awesome.
Yeah.
It was
Andrew
really cool, all the people that we had out there.
Andrew Yang came by
That's right. Andrew
with the
Yang was
Forward
there last
Party.
January
Yep.
with Forward Party. So anyway, that's the 23rd of the month from 2 to 4 p.m. at the State House. So I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit more too. But we're going to run to this break. And then when we come back on the other side, I want to talk about more of these pre-filed bills. We got some things that are addressing libraries. We've got some things that are addressing other kinds of forms of what you might consider to be state censorship. So, let's get into it.
Good
It's the
stuff.
Libertarian
That's
Hour. We're
right.
taking over for Kev this afternoon. Don't go away. All right, welcome back into Thursday afternoon program. Kasie and Casey sitting in for Kev. We've been talking a little bit about ranked choice voting, but now I want to talk about some of these other pre-filed legislation. Some of them are related to they're called things like Child's Device Protection Act and social media. I don't know, but it's basically co-parenting with the government. The bottom line is it's trying to create laws that would restrict either the social media company or the device itself from being able to get in front of your kid and
Right.
somehow, corrupt your kid. And so we were talking during the break about like what measures you and Heather are taking to help Charlie, who's just 9, get safely on the internet and spend time on the internet. And we took some pretty aggressive measures with Holly early on.
Yeah.
We had a couple of like some strict rules, but I mean, I just want you to kind of, if you don't mind, sharing like kind of what your perspective is on this and like what things you think people should be looking out for. I certainly don't think this legislation, number one, it's probably not going to go anywhere anyway. I mean, it's very difficult to make laws against technology companies that are just in the state, right?
Right.
Like usually the technology company is able to work outside the state, so they're not really paying much attention to what's happening in South Carolina. So it's really kind of more symbolic than anything else.
Yeah.
It would be very difficult for them to figure out how to enforce this law
Yep.
because like some kid gets by it on their phone and like the police are going to come to your house and knock on their, like this isn't even an enforceable law either, right?
Yeah.
So all of that to say like this is symbolic. The legislators out there trying to fight the good fight for the parents, but come on, parents, you should be doing this yourself.
It's feel good virtue signaling and it's rallying the base is what it does. And it's like, oh yeah, everybody's upset about big tech and what they're doing to our kids and all that stuff. And so and here the small government people supposedly are the ones that are like, we need to get in between you and your child and decide what, like, no. I don't co-parent with the government, just like you said. Like, no, I make decisions for my child, my wife and I. That's what we do. And some legislator is not going to get to come in and make a law to get in between that. It's not going to happen. And I'm an IT guy. I'll tell you, like, as soon as you make a law about something in the IT world, we just go around it.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, we're just far behind the curve on that. And I think
Yeah.
one of the ways that people can stay ahead of it is to be the person that's there. So, like when TikTok first came out, my friend Casey's got 5 daughters. She jumped on TikTok and was like, let me figure out what this is all about, right?
Yeah,
Like, let me understand how it works. Let me see what these accounts are for. She was over her daughter's shoulders while they were looking at it, while they were using it, until she fully understood the tech, right? If you're not going to do that, then just tell your kid they can't be on that app. Like,
Yeah.
that's just not the app for you. I'm sorry. I'm not available to police that with you. I'm not available to oversee, to provide parental oversight here. So you just can't use it. End of story.
As it turns out, no law is going to make somebody a good parent.
You don't say.
Yeah, you don't say.
Yeah.
Like the same people that will tell you that criminals don't obey, laws are going to tell you that, oh yeah, like laws against kids getting on social media, that's going to be a thing.
Laws only apply to law-abiding citizens.
Right.
Yeah. So we had this conversation last week on the Chris Wooten show. We were talking with Ralph, who's he's a lobbyist for the motorcycle organizations, right? And so one of the things that's up here as a pre-filed bill is one of the ones that's going to protect motorcycle safety. It's about not blowing yard trash onto the road, right? So motorcycles, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with this, but sometimes that road trash can be sticks and things, and they can hide underneath dangerous things, can hide underneath leaves and stuff like that. And so
Yes.
the motorcycles will hit them and they lose
Yes.
traction, and it's very dangerous for them.
Yes.
So anyway, so there's legislation that's about making it illegal to blow that stuff onto which that's fine. Okay. Penalties, citations, whatever you got to do, make the motorcyclist safe. I'm fine, right? At the end of the day, more
Or-
laws is less freedom.
Or take responsibility as a motorcycle rider and slow down and navigate around the hazard, just like you would a puddle.
You're going to get Ralph to call us here in about 30 seconds. So
And
anyway,
I'm an anti-helmet law guy. I'm if it's on two wheels, go ham, right? But at the same, it's like take responsibility for your freedom.
the laws are there, yeah, for anyhow, all that to say, I mean, it's not a law that affects me because I don't blow yard trash into the
Right.
street, right? Like,
Right.
so in that case, I'm one of those people that's just like, this is legislation that doesn't affect me in any way.
I've blown mine from the street into my yard to
Yeah.
make my street look nice.
I mean, I'm not,
Yeah.
so the benign stuff doesn't really affect me. Anyway, all that to say, I don't know why I went into the motorcycle one, but there was, we were talking about the co-parenting
Yes,
with the government. I can't remember now.
which I don't do.
I just lost my train of thought on that. Oh, some of these pre-filed bills that are there, I know what it was. Chris Wooten and I, we were talking last week.
Yeah.
So the conversation we were having was about whether or not your legislators are creating law, who the incentives are there for, right? Like,
Yes.
what's the incentive for this law? Why does the law exist? Who's trying to get this thing, put forward? And is it your voters? Is it your constituents? Is it your donors? Is it your party? Like, who are the people that are saying this is good legislation? Let's push it through. And, whether or not you can follow it back to why are we building this legislation? Why do we have to build this legislation? What does it look like, and should it be there? Anyway, I'm kind of rambling now, but the point is,
I'll tell you this. In the last session, I had a friendship or working relationship with a House member, and we chatted here and there, and he filed a bill that was egregious. It was an anti-drag bill, and decency laws and stuff. All that stuff's already covered, but it's ripe for First Amendment abuses and stuff like that. And I went and sat down in his office. I was like, man, what's the story here? And this is no good on I had a thesis, He's like, well, I have trying to get the attention of the Attorney General. It's like, I feel like an email would have worked, or a phone call maybe, or you're putting a lot of people, what if it passed?
oh no, there's this one, right, that relates to the requirement that cursive writing be taught in public elementary schools, requiring that they learn cursive writing.
It's actually helpful to teach cursive first, and then print makes print easier. We taught our son.
I don't have a problem with
I say-
teaching cursive. By all means, teach cursive, but
Yeah.
what are you not going to teach so that you can teach cursive?
Well, why does it have to be a law? Why can't you just let teachers teach?
Let the educators decide, right?
What does a politician in Colombia know about what's best to teach kids in handwriting? Like,
Yeah.
and why do we want to hang on to I like cursive. I write in cursive too, but like, is it worth a law? Is it worth enforcing with a gun? Because that's what laws are.
Yeah.
Is you will do this, or guys with guns will come and stop you or make you.
Or people will just ignore it.
Or
So that's the flip side of this, right?
Right.
Like if we're not going to enforce the law, then people are going to ignore the law. So why create the law?
right.
Right? Like why make it a law in the first place?
We just
Is this something that we feel like we need to go to the mattresses on? Like it's so important that we 100% have to, as a society,
Yeah.
codify this
we
in a
got
way that prevents people from acting out of line.
we got billions of dollars being just given out, taxpayer dollars, slush fund to Scout Motors,
Corporate welfare.
corporate welfare. But here we're focusing on kids learning cursive.
Let's make sure they know they know cursive. It's critical.
Anyway.
Well, some of these, again, like you mentioned the phrase before, the virtue signaling, some of this is that people they're really concerned about this. This is something that's really important to them. They don't understand how we can continue on in a civilized way without people being able to read original documentation of, say, the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution. And here's what I will say. So, conspiracy theorists, listen closely. Have you seen some of these things where, like, the thing that we thought was true is not true anymore? So, like, the
Yeah.
Mississippi, what's the longest river in the continental U.S.? The Mississippi.
Right.
But if you go and look it up, it's actually the Missouri River.
Uh-huh.
And it's because it's longer by like 3 feet. But we were always taught that the Mississippi River was longer, but somehow that's changed, right? And we're all being gaslighted by the internet. So these kinds of things are out there. Like, how will we know the truth when we see it?
It's so pernicious.
It is pernicious. All right, this has been Libertarians. We'll be back on the other side of the break. Don't go away.
That's
Kasie and Casey here on a Thursday afternoon, sitting in for Kev. We're going to go back to the phone lines. We've got a caller. Thank you for holding. Caller, you're on the air. What's your name?
Hey, Casey.
That
Love
sounds like
hearing you.
that sounds like Ed.
It is.
How are you, Ed?
How you doing, buddy?
Just fine. I was thinking about you guys when we got off the plane at Athens.
Oh, yeah?
My wife and I went to Greece for a vacation this past October. And as soon as we got off the plane and got into our car, we started searching for the seat belts. Well, our driver says, "Oh, it's not necessary. We don't wear seat belts very much over here. You can if you want, but you don't have to." And we said, "Well, you know, it's the law in our country." And they said, the driver said, "Well, yeah, it's the law here too, but everybody ignores it."
So their police aren't writing them tickets for those non-seatbelt wearing folks, huh?
Right. And well, we've been conditioned, so we did wear our seat belts, but
Sure. Yeah.
they have a more laid-back view about most laws over there. Anyway, the ranked choice voting. I know y'all are moving on to another topic, but I really like ranked choice voting. If people, I know a lot of people that are Republicans and forced to vote in the primary, and usually the person that's most extreme in the primary usually wins.
Yep.
That's
So
right.
a lot of times you have an extreme Republican versus an extreme Democrat.
Yeah.
And I don't think you would have that in ranked choice voting.
Agreed.
I
And that
agree.
would be a good thing.
Wouldn't it?
Agreed. We did actually think that when we first started forming the Better Ballot organization here in South Carolina, it was 2021, right after the 2020 election. And so because I had worked on the Joe Jorgensen campaign, they reached out to me and asked me if I would come forward and help with Nicole and Melissa and these kind of crowds. So when we first started talking about it, one of our initial targets was primary voting, to say, could we get the primaries in South Carolina to adopt ranked choice voting, just to create a little bit of a more even playing field
Yeah.
for the primaries.
Yeah.
But of course, all of us being third party, supporters and third-party members, like the idea that we could possibly change the primaries was sort of laughable. So we moved on to those county and municipal elections instead.
Yeah, and the bill that's going to be filed or is filed already is only it changes the law to allow it. It doesn't mandate it or anything like that.
Just makes it
says,
available.
yeah, if you want to do this, you can do that under your own provisions of your county or whatever you got going on.
Right.
Yeah. And Casey Crow, you mentioned that you would automatically vote against most bills. Well,
yeah.
I was thinking the perfect thing to do, the perfect person to write in for you would be George Tecumseh Sherman, who said, and I can hear Casey Whitener laughing, so I know she knows it. If I'm nominated, I will not run. If I am elected, I will not serve.
That's right.
So someone that is elected and doesn't serve would be perfect for you guys.
Oh no, I would be happy to serve.
Yeah.
It's just what you can expect from a Casey Crow politician is somebody who votes no on just about everything.
Yeah.
Because most of what we see in the legislature here is something to restrict our rights, not to improve them. You want to cut taxes? I'm there all day. You want to give money to Scout Motors out of my pocket? That's a no. That's a hard no.
Hard
for me.
no. Hard
Yeah.
pass. Yeah.
Yeah.
We appreciate you, Ed. I'm glad you got a chance to go to Greece. I hope your holidays were wonderful.
Oh, they were great. It was a dream vacation. It was everything I was hoping it would be. I hope to go again sometime.
Wonderful. I bet the food was amazing.
Yeah, I bet.
I would love Greece. I would love to go to Greece.
Oh, yeah. We ate at a little sidewalk cafe. It was very popular, and it was a Greek name, and we didn't know what it meant. And we asked the person, and they said, the Kindness Cafe.
Nice.
I love that name.
Yeah, I like that.
Nice. All right. Well, so we can expect you to become an entrepreneur in the next year or so. Open up your own Greek sidewalk cafe called the Kindness Cafe.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
You let us know. We'll be there.
Live the entrepreneur dream, Ed.
All right.
We
Take
appreciate
care,
you. Have a good one.
Thanks, Ed.
I love hearing from our callers that we talk to just about every time we're on the air. That was fun.
Yes, and I didn't get a chance, but we were at the Ochre Strut. We had a party booth there, and this guy just came out of the crowd straight to me, and he was like, "Are you Casey? You're Casey Crow." I said, "I know that voice. That's Ed." And
really? Oh my gosh! I hung up on him before you could even talk to him about that.
Well, he can always call back, but it was the highlight of my day to get to meet Ed. It was great.
That's awesome. You did send me the picture of you and Ed with an arm around each other. Hey, this is cool. So yeah. Thanks for coming and finding us at the Ochre Strut, Ed. Sorry I missed you. I'd already bailed out to go take the kid on the driving lesson. But all right, so it's Kasie and Casey sit in for Kev. We were talking about some of these pre-filed bills in the legislature. Yesterday morning, I was sitting in with Micah Caskey on the rep. That's 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. every Wednesday morning here on The Point is the rep. And it's two of our State House representatives, Chris Wooten and Micah Caskey, who are here on the regular. One of the two of them is usually here. And then also yesterday, Brandon Ott was with them as well. And it was interesting to talk to them about some of these pre-filed bills because their perspective on it was that the pre-fileds are unlikely, most of them unlikely to really get any traction once the legislative session begins. And my question for them was like, what are you really going to be working on this legislative session? And so I started kind of throwing, started throwing some of these pre-filed bills at them like, well, what about this? And what about that? And both of them are looking at me like, no. I'm like, then what are you going to be doing this legislative session?
What would you say you do here?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, what will you actually be working on? So I was kind of interested in that. We've been looking at them too. If you're interested, there's a website called legiscan.com, Legiscan, legiscan.com, and it has the South Carolina legislative session here coming up, all the pre-filed bills. There's a lot of them. And some of them are redundant, like we were talking about before. A few of them are similar in terms of trying to restrict certain things. And again, to Casey's point, all of this legislation is about restricting freedom. It's not any of it is about extending it, except there is one here for a constitutional amendment that provides for bodily autonomy, specifically for reproductive rights. And I know that this one's not going to go anywhere, sadly.
Nope.
But it is nice to know that there are people in the State House that are fighting for bodily autonomy for the citizens in our state. But anyhow, We got another break coming up here in just a couple minutes, unless you want to hit something. Oh, we were talking about the IRL. So Formula One
Yeah,
racing.
yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned that there's a potential to change some rules in Formula One racing. So explain to our listeners what we were discussing.
Okay, so I'll make it quick for anybody that's not a Formula One fan, and if you are, you'll get this. Basically, when they set the order of the cars on the track for the race, they do a qualifying uh, event the day before, and so the fastest car gets number one, second fastest number two, and all that stuff. So there has been discussion because it's so difficult for the cars to pass each other, and how this relates in because this is economics and incentives and unintended consequences, and this is how people think, and this is why we have to think critically about the ideas that we have. So there's been talk about, well, let's do reverse order. So let's make the slowest car at the front and the fastest car at the back. And that way, that there'll be a lot of passing, there'll be a lot of action, it'll make it more fun and all that other stuff. And the reporters are asking the drivers, and what do you guys think about this? And they're like, oh, that might mix it up. Or some people are like, why mess with it and all that. And my first thought was, well, then if I'm a driver, I'm just going to drive the slowest so that when it's reverse order, I ended up in the front.
Right. I would qualify slow.
That's right.
And the reason I wanted you to bring this up before we go to break is the idea of incentives. So the question
Yes.
is, what is the incentive then to qualify at the front of the field
Right.
when you know you're just going to get put at the back for the beginning of the race?
Exactly.
And this kind of connects to a one of these pre-file bills, which is related to teen prescriptions, and it was actually covered on WYFF last night. So we watched it on the local news last night. This is a bill that's been pre-filed. They actually had some committee hearings on it last year about making sure that parents are aware before the prescription is fulfilled for these teens, for these minors. And so they were talking about, again, like how what are the implications of this going to be? So I want to talk about incentives, and I want to talk about unintended consequences when we come back, because we're going into a legislative session where a lot of these bills may in fact have a lot of unintended consequences.
That's right.
All right, it is the afternoon drive. Kasie and Casey sitting in for Kev. We're going to be right back. Don't go away. All right, Thursday afternoon, Kasie and Casey sitting in for Kev. The Groucho's Deli phone lines are open, 803-799-8255. That's 803-799-TALK. Kasie and Casey here. Normally we talk libertarian politics. Today we're kind of veering off into maybe our subtopic always, which is incentives. So thinking about what are the incentives for certain legislation, and then also what are the unintended consequences of that legislation. And we prepped this conversation in the last segment by talking about Formula One, thinking about changing the order of qualifying.
Mhm.
So as a race car, you go out there, you drive as fast as you can. If you drive the fastest qualifying lap, you start first, right?
That's right.
But they're talking about reversing the order of the field. Now, NASCAR has done this, right? NASCAR has made a lot of different rules changes. They do this thing where after the first 50 laps, they reverse the field. So you've got, they've broken up races in this way where
What?
you'll qualify first, right? You do your first 50 laps. You get a winner for the first 50 laps, right? So you get something for having won the first 50 laps. But then they reverse the field and you race another 50 laps. And then I think they do something else. And then I can't remember exactly how it works, but there's a bunch of different rules changes to try to make the sport more competitive, which would then make it more interesting. More people would watch it. More advertising dollars. So it is all about trying to get more eyeballs on the sport.
Sure.
But I would say if I was to speak to the Formula One people about making such a rule change, my first thing would say, just call the NASCAR folks and
Yeah.
ask them how that worked out for them.
Yeah.
Because I remember when we were big NASCAR fans back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I felt like it was the biggest sport in the nation. I felt like it was even more well watched than football, right?
Yeah.
And then something happened and things just kind of dropped off. And it was partly after Dale Earnhardt died, Jeff Gordon retired,
Mhm.
Jimmy Johnson has recently retired. Some of these kind of big titans of the sport have left the sport, and nobody has really filled that vacuum, right?
Yeah.
That gap of leadership. But if we'd stayed engaged, we probably would have been, I don't know, maybe we just outgrew it. I'm not entirely sure, but
Yeah, football has seen a decline in viewership for a long time until Taylor Swift started showing up, and so maybe we just need Taylor Swift to come to Formula One
care about
races.
Formula
Yeah,
One,
that'd
yeah.
be great.
get her a new boyfriend.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think she's pretty happy with Travis.
I think so.
Yeah, bless her heart.
Bless her heart. Good for her. That's a good, and the real bless her heart, not the Southern bless her
Yeah,
heart.
no. I mean,
Yeah,
like, I really am happy for her. Like,
yes,
I feel genuinely happy
yeah,
for the Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce scenario.
that's
So
right.
people can hate on it all they want. That's fine. Haters gonna hate.
I just want my
But
girl to be happy. That's all.
yeah, exactly. Just want somebody who treats her well.
That's right.
Okay, so if we think about incentives, though, when if you trace it back to incentives, and this is, as a matter of fact, yesterday on the radio, I don't know if you said it on on the air or not, but Micah said something about really not having any respect for economists at all. But in the one thing that he thought they were right about was incentives, was that everything comes back to incentives. And so I want to think about that, like IRL, or what is Formula One trying to do here,
Yeah.
and is that what they're going to get?
Yeah, I think that's a I can understand the sentiment about economists because a lot of times the economists that get the most eyeballs and attention and fame are economists like Paul Krugman, he's a partisan, and so he makes economic predictions,
Hmm.
right? And libertarians are typically more along the more Austrian school of economics, which is you can't predict anything. People behave irrationally inside even rational systems. You just
Right.
don't know how they're going to behave if you can't understand the incentives. And so and then you got to pay attention to those. And so in Formula 1, the economics model of human behavior is okay, what's the incentive for a driver if you're going into qualifying and you know that whatever you get is going to be reversed? Well,
Right.
the incentive for Formula 1 is to make more exciting racing happen because all these teams have to build their own cars. It's a constructors league, so they all handcraft their cars within certain parameters that they're given, and they have to meet regulations like how much fuel they can flow, how big their engine is, and all that other stuff. And so within those parameters, every team brings their best car, their best driver, their best strategy, and all that stuff within the rules, and then they race. And so sometimes, especially by the end of the season, after everybody's brought upgrades and made adjustments and looked at each other and like, what are those guys doing? You end up where races can sometimes get boring, especially in races like Monaco where there's like no passing because
Right.
it's a street circuit. It's really tight. There's just not a lot of action, right? Um, and so they're like, well, people want to see them battling out for positions and passing and all those exciting things. And they're like, how can we manufacture that, right? And
Right.
so, oh well, let's just talk about this reverse grid order where they're going to start out opposite. And it like, okay, yeah, well, yeah, there would be, you put the fastest car in the very back, there's going to be a lot of passing. There's probably going to be a lot of accidents and all that other stuff. But that's only if the drivers and teams behave in the way you think they will, which is not what's going to happen.
Which is if they continue to want the fastest lap in qualifying,
That's
right?
right.
And so you have to figure out a way to incentivize them to get the fastest lap in qualifying, knowing it's going to put them at the back of the field.
Right.
So is there a big purse to be had? Like if you win qualifying, you get $1 million up front, and then you're like, I'm willing to, for the money, I'm willing to go ahead and put myself at the back of the race, knowing that I'm going to get this $1 million prize if I get up front, right? Like, do you create some financial incentives to make them want that qualifying? And that's what I was saying, like with NASCAR, doing the reverse order, right?
Yeah.
You know, you might start out the beginning of the race, but then the guys that do those races successfully, they're not interested in winning the first 50 laps or the middle 50 laps. They're interested in winning at the end.
That's
And
right.
so they just stay in the middle of the pack.
That's right.
And they just drive in the middle until you get to the last few laps. And then they start working their way through the field to be in the front when the checkered flag
Yeah.
flies.
They save their tires, they save their fuel, they save their energy, they save their everything until the end when it really matters.
So we listened to, as we were going down to Jacksonville for the Gator Bowl, we were listening to Honestly with Barry Weiss, which is one of our favorite podcasts. And one of the episode we listened to was why half of American babies are born to unmarried mothers. And it's a woman who is an economist, and she did her research on this phenomena of babies being born to unwed mothers. And the question was about the demographics, right? About not just from a economic perspective, poverty level, things like that, but also racial demographics and that kind of thing. And she was saying that the people in her field, the economists in her field, were like, you really want to get into this? Like, you really want to talk about this? You really want to put these numbers out there? And she was like, it's just data. This is not me talking about policy. This is not me talking about what we should do to fix it. This is me putting the data out there and saying,
Right.
this is the truth.
Right.
this is what we're seeing, right? And so if you want to come next and say, how do we fix it? Or why do we see that? That's fine. She goes, all I want to do is get the data and put it out there for people to notice. And so I want to talk a little bit when we come back on the other side about whether or not we can make informed decisions if we're not getting good data. And then the other part of it is, are these policy decisions being driven by data, or are they being driven by what we wish would happen, like the Formula One conversation?
Right.
All right, it's Kasie and Casey. We're sitting in for Kev. We're going to be back on the other side of the break. We got 30 minutes to go. Groucho's Deli phone lines are open. Give us a call. All right, here we go. Thursday afternoon, Kasie and Casey sitting in for Kev. It's about 5:33 here at the point, and we are Groucho's Deli phone lines open, 803-799-8255. That's 803-799-TALK. Glad to take your phone calls. Glad to have some conversation about incentives, which is what we're talking about, trying to figure out whether or not the incentives line up with the legislation that's being put forward. So the legislation I mentioned in the first segment was this one about trying to get parental consent for prescriptions.
Mhm.
And some of these prescriptions are things like contraceptives. Some of the prescriptions are to treat sexually transmitted diseases, right? So some of these things are healthcare decisions that minors are making
Right.
that the parents, want to have visibility to. And so
Sure.
the legislation is saying, like, let's make sure that the parents have visibility to it. I thought was interesting when they showed it on the news was the people who testified in this conversation were the pharmacies saying, look, you have no idea what a backlog this is going to create for us if we can't fill prescriptions without getting in touch with legal guardians.
Yeah.
And the other part of it is those young people who don't live with their legal guardians, right?
Right.
Who
Yep.
live with grandparents or whomever else, that, that's somebody who cares for them, who takes care of them, but maybe doesn't necessarily have the legal consent to be able to fulfill this need. So the incentive here is to give parents transparency and visibility to their kids' health care.
Right.
But the unintended consequences, specifically for the pharmacies, is that backlog of prescriptions and people not getting the care that they need to have, and things like that. So, like, just riff on that for just a sec.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this all the time, is we should be judging policies and regulations and all that by their effects and their performance rather than their intent, because intent is easy, right? We all have good intentions. We're going to go down here and we're going to make this law, and then all of a sudden, like, we get the Cobra principle and stuff like that. So, I think that when it comes to prescriptions and all that, like, there's going to be kids whose parents are not safe. There's going to be kids whose parents are not around. There's going to be there's those kind of kids who are seeking medical care in the absence of their parent are probably doing so for a reason.
Right.
And if you're a parent and you're a good parent, none of this should be a surprise to you.
Well, I don't even know if we use the word good. I mean, that feels a little pejorative too. But I think, like, the idea of being involved, being aware, seeing what's happening, trying to make yourself open and available to your kids to be able to talk to you. Like,
Yeah.
we just watched, this is going to trivialize it, but we just watched that movie, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And Holly and I watched it today, and we were kind of laughing about it because there is this, like, moment in between her and her mom where they're like, neither one of them knows what to say to have this conversation. And eventually, of course, they get past this, like, kind of awkwardness between them over these particular topics. But, like, Holly and I were kind of laughing about it. Like, it's a hard thing to be emotionally available to your children. Like,
Sure.
it is
Yeah.
it's a difficult thing. And there's a lot of stuff on social media now about, like, gentle parenting and all these parents kind of making fun of gentle parenting and this sort of thing. But
Right.
like, it's no surprise that parents who are emotionally available, who are open, who are able to have this relationship with their children where their children can trust them to not overreact, to not blow things out of proportion, like, that those parents are going to have maybe I'm not I mean, I don't know, because some kids are just devious. Like, some kids are just out there trying to get away with stuff. You know
Sure.
what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
for
you could be
sure.
as open and emotionally available as possible,
Yeah.
and your kids might be pulling the wool over your eyes. Who
Yeah.
knows, right?
Parenting is hard, for sure.
But I would say, like, in the legislation, the incentive here for the legislator is to do something to help the parents who are voters, right?
Right.
And I would just encourage our legislators to think about those teenagers who also someday will be voters and might be a little angry
And also,
that you restricted
I will
their
rem-
access to prescriptions.
I will remind you that not only do I not co-parent with the government, I also don't co-parent with pharmacists.
Right.
Like, I'm sorry, but when you have the government decide, when you have this, you create this arbiter, right? There has to be some commissar who makes the decision in your life. And they're never going to be able to make, I mean, poverty, you would think, would be one of the easier things for a government to handle, right? People are poor, they need money, they need help. We still have poverty. Poverty is almost unchanged despite trillions of dollars and resources and time being poured into it. It's because people are in crisis for different reasons. And everybody's situation is unique and they need help in different ways. And we try to do these like blanket policy prescription ideas thinking we're going to help, and we're not helping.
So if you have the ask, right? The ask from the voter, do something about this, fix this, make this a thing, right? And you as a legislator are like, well, I don't know how to make this a thing. Like, I don't know how to fix this. Is it the role of the state? Is it the role of government to fix this?
Right.
And I would say like 90% of the time, my answer is going to be no.
Right.
Like, it's just not. And
Right.
if you're a parent and you're in crisis and you need help, like, what are the things that are available to you? Well, of course, you have your parents, right? And if they got it totally wrong, then you can do what most parents do, which is the opposite of what their parents did, right?
Right.
Like, you have your friends, you have your community, you have your neighborhood, you have the other parents in the same age group that your kid is in. Like, hey, are you seeing this? What are you doing about it, right? Like, there are resources available to you. But I think like the idea that we would go to our legislators and ask them to intervene on our behalf just feels like I don't even know who would ask for that legislation.
Yeah, that's the thing is it's like the- in the spectrum of good parents to like inattentive, not good parents, right? I don't mean that anybody that has a child that's getting a prescription they don't know about is a bad parent, but you can't fix whatever that is with a law.
Right.
Like that's not going to fix
By
anything.
saying your kid can't have it.
Yeah, and what
Yeah.
ends up happening, the unintended consequence of that is kids that do need those things and should legitimately have them, but fall into this like bucket now, all of a sudden are denied the care that they need.
Mhm.
And it's like, is the like you said, what about STDs and stuff? If you have somebody, a teenager, a child that's still under the care of a guardian or maybe not, and is sexually active, and they do have an STD, do you want that cured or not?
Or do you want them to be so afraid or to not have access
Right.
to the prescription that it progresses, or that worse that they spread it, right? Like,
Right.
yeah, there's all kinds of terrible unintended consequences with a law like this.
Yeah, and you just like whenever there is a choice, the government should not decide.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm here. I'm waiting for people to call and disagree with us, but maybe nobody that's listening does. 803-799-8255, 803-799-TALK. Casey and Casey sitting in for Kev here on the afternoon drive to get today, this Thursday, and we're talking about unintended consequences, specifically of some of these laws that are there as pre-filed
Should
laws
we
that may show up in our.
should we talk about the Cobra principle because I brought it up and nobody's calling?
Well, no, we just got two people calling, so
Okay, all
we're
right.
gonna go to them first.
Let's
So
do callers.
welcome to the program, caller. You're on the air. What's your name?
Hey, Casey, it's Nick.
Hey, Nick.
Hey Nick, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm just I'm a little confused with the statement about if it's how does the government decide whether your teenager is going to need STD medication or an abortion, so to speak? Because, in my opinion, if they got an STD, they probably need an abortion. You know, I mean, that's just life. I mean, if you be realistic about it, you know, if they're not being safe, then they're not being safe. It don't usually just stop at 1.5, you know.
And you think the government should be able to make that choice or not?
No, I'm just saying, how does that equate to the government telling your teenager not to have unprotected sex? I mean, you know, should if I had a daughter or a son or a rabbit or whatever and it had an STD, do I want to know about it? Sure, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
if it was my child, sure, yeah.
The difficulty is when the state steps in between the relationship between the patient and the pharmacist.
Right.
On behalf, what they think of is a concerned parent who is ignorant of this situation.
Right.
And what ends up happening is the state has the monopoly on violence, right? So everybody has to do what the state says, supposedly, in theory.
So the pharmacist is going to do what the state
pharmacist
says.
is going to do what the state says, no matter what that is. So,
Right.
well, let's say this is great. It's a great idea. 100% of parents agree. Cool, we pass it. Okay. Now the next session, it gets modified. Now it's awful, but all the pharmacists have to follow the law, and it's already law, and that's just that, and we all have to deal with it, and people suffer for it. So
Yeah.
putting the state in between a patient and a caregiver, a doctor, is never a good idea.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I still don't. I mean, I'm all for no more. The least law is possible up until the point of pretty much anarchy. But I'm just saying, it's like the war on drugs, it's the war on abortion, it's the war on everything,
Yeah.
the war on war. And what do we have? We have more of everything we freaking try to stop.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying is, like, we can decriminalize all the drugs, but if we don't do it in a very strict, regulated fashion, like, okay, everybody can have all the fentanyl you want, but we're also going to have 110% more treatment centers, then we just end up with a worse problem than we started out with. You know what I'm saying? So, and
It's
all I'm saying is, like, I don't know the fact that, I'm older than both of y'all, and I don't think I can walk into the Walgreens and say I want a prescription for some antibiotics because I've got an STD. They're going to say, "Where's your doctor?"
Yeah.
I
Unfortunately,
don't know
that is
these
true.
teenagers that are
Yeah.
just walking in and
Yeah.
getting medication.
Maybe we should file that bill.
No, you're right. They've already been to the doctor. If they're getting a prescription, they've already been to the doctor.
That's
So there's
right.
already been one person intervening,
That's
right?
right.
And so then, okay, well,
Yeah.
they've already been with a medical professional who has said this is what they need, but now we need to make sure the parent knows too, right? So interesting to put that parent in between after the doctor, but before the
So,
prescription gets delivered. Yeah.
Right.
All right. Thanks,
because
Nick. We
I'm just
appreciate you.
looking at it like Planned Parenthood. That's all.
Yeah,
It
that's
really hasn't stopped the needs for a lot of stuff.
you're exactly
Planned
right.
Parenthood is great, but it hasn't really fixed social problems overall.
Truth. You're
I'll let y'all
exactly
go
right.
with that.
We appreciate it. Thanks, Nick. All right. Caller, you're on the phone with Casey and Casey. What's your name?
It's me, Ed, again.
Hi, Ed.
I'm Nick says he's older than y'all. Well, I'm older than both of you combined. And I tell you, this one's a tough one. I don't see it as the government versus getting in the way between the patient and the pharmacist. I see it as the government actually getting in the way of parental rights.
Yeah.
I think parents do have a right to know what's happening with their children, but as you said, if a child needs important medication and they're afraid to go to their parents, that's a tough one. I don't know where to come down on that one exactly.
Well, it's interesting you bring up parental rights because there's another pre-filed bill, which is House Bill 4691, which is about parental rights. And it says the ultimate responsibility to direct the upbringing, education, healthcare, and mental health of their children. So there is a bill out there that's trying to put the parents in charge of the kids 100% and get the state out of it. So that's kind of interesting too, that we've got these two that sort of maybe contradict one another when we think, although the one with the pharmacy one is trying to hold the pharmacist accountable for whether or not the parents know. Right. So like I don't know. There's a lot of state intervention here between these two bills.
How do you know it's actually the parent? Is it a phone call? And do you give the parent like, oh yeah, this is and it's actually
Do they
like
have to show up with the driver's license?
Yeah. Is
like
it your neighbor?
how would they prove it?
What if you have different names?
Right.
My mom had a different name from me.
That could be a thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah. We appreciate you. We're going to go to break. We'll chat with you on the other side.
Thanks, Ed.
Okay.
All right. This is Kasie and Casey. We've got one more break to go. And on the other side, we will, I don't know, probably talk a little bit more about this because it's interesting.
It is interesting.
All right. Kasie and Casey sitting in for Kev here, the last segment of the show. It's been fun being here. And it always flies by.
It does.
It always flies by. All right. We've got two callers on the line. So we're going to go to our first one who's been holding. Thank you so much for your patience. Welcome into the program. Who's calling?
I think this is Will again.
It is Will again. Hi, Will.
Hey, Will again.
Hey, miracles must exist today. I never thought I would ever agree with Ed on anything. But this whole idea about parental rights is because I still don't get this whole craziness in California where they tell a parent that you're responsible for a child, but the child has the right to do something with the aid of somebody else and the parent not know. That doesn't work. If a child cannot make a business decision, cannot make a financial obligation, how can a child make a medical decision without that guardian or parent knowing? They're conflicting interests.
Okay.
Parental rights is a true issue.
So I don't disagree with parental rights and the idea that parents ought to be involved with the care and the health of their children and all this kind of thing. I think our challenge is whether or not the state should be codifying that into law and trying to enforce it with police officers and guns.
Right.
So that's kind of where I'm at. Is like I think parental rights from a philosophical perspective, you're 100% correct.
Yes.
But and there's no way that California should be making laws that erode parental rights. But I don't think that we need to be making laws that so-called protect parental rights either. Like
Right.
I feel like we should all just recognize that that's a thing that parents ought to have the rights.
Can the government parent my child better than me? No. Great. Then stay out of it.
So yeah, that's probably where we come down on it, Will. I don't think we're against parental rights. I think we definitely think that
Right.
that the parents ought to be engaged.
But the difficulty is when you have situations where the parents are not safe. And that is especially prevalent in the LGBTQ community of young adults, because a significant portion of the homeless youth in this country are LGBTQ kids who have been kicked out, abused, kicked out of their house and made unwelcome because of their sexuality or gender identity and all that. So, like, you have to
But
remember
then that
that
becomes an extenuating circumstance, which is already covered by law because you have that.
Because you have that issue with other children when they when situations like that, when you have situations with battered children and things like that.
Right, emancipated
They
youth.
already yes.
Yeah.
And so there are already in place. The thing about it is that people keep trying to add something for something that's already there. It's just that nobody wants to use it because they feel, well, if I use this, I'm bad or it's wrong. No, what's already there is there.
Well,
Why are you trying to turn a crocodile into a bunny rabbit?
Well, I would say that the reason people continue to add on to things that are already there is because a lot of the American electorate, for the most part, thinks that legislators should go to the houses and legislate, and that they don't have anything else to do. Like, and this is the thing they come up with in their spare time, is to like add laws that already exist.
We got another caller, and I don't want to run out of time before we're able to get to that person.
Not a problem.
Thank you so much, Will. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Will.
All right. Caller, you're on with Kasie and Casey. What's your name?
Hey, good afternoon. This is Ralph.
Hi, Ralph.
I was listening to you. I had a couple errands, and I was just amazed at this. And one of the things, I deal a lot with the motorcycle legislation, is I look at the sponsor of the bill, and I hate to say it, a lot of times they just introduce bills just because. It's not even like the parental rights bill. I don't know who's sponsoring that, but, I mean, is that really going to go somewhere? Because the session is going to start in January and end in May. It's just...
It's Representative Marvin Smith.
Marvin Smith.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. We could ask Micah Caskey on
You could
Wednesday
go-
morning.
You can go to opensecrets.org and find out who the contributors to his
And
campaign
how
are.
many of them? Yeah. Well,
yeah. But, one of the things I ran into, they have a noise ordinance bill that I got alerted to, and I went and looked, and then one of the guys said, well, talk to the representative. Why are they introducing it? And then I, went to the State House and talked to staff, and they said, well, there's somebody there. And so today I called Sheriff Lott and asked him. He said, oh, yeah, it's Arcadia Lakes, and they don't like the motorcycle noise on 2-notch. But like he said, which I already know, is you can't enforce this. So it's almost like what you guys are talking about with this parental right. A lot of times there's a piece of legislation that's been introduced by somebody or a constituent, but it really has no logical path. It's not going to go anywhere. Now, the one for the drugs, I'd be real curious to, whether they kid for an STD, because I know DHEC is very involved in, they have to track, like, is HIV bigger in this area or county? And if it is, do we get out billboards? And I know it sounds kind of funny, but, a lot of times education is like really big, especially with the youth.
Well, that's another part of that same bill is not just does the parent have to be notified, but DHEC has to be notified as well. So teenagers.
I'm almost, I hate to say I'm running in between the lines, but I'm almost wondering if DHEC isn't trying, this is one of the things that I see in the subcommittees. All of a sudden you figure out, okay, wait a minute, this was really DHEC trying to push this.
Yeah,
and somebody modified it, like you said,
for their reporting purposes.
It's a public health thing,
or
yeah,
or some kind of grant. Like, hey, there's a grant. If the state says we're going to track syphilis, then we get $100,000.
Yep.
And then somebody adds the parent on there. Well, they got to be notified, and before you know it, it's like you said, it's just a big old unintended consequences.
Yeah.
I really wish when they do bills that there was a summary or something, because all of us have we can't just go to the people all the time, and we can't, no offense to Micah or Chris Wooten, but they don't know a lot of times what these other people are doing either.
Truth.
They're coworkers,
Yeah.
So it's just really unfortunate because and I appreciate you guys, being on the libertarian side, because you'll ask these questions to where, unfortunately, more of a government give me type persons, they just let the stuff go.
Yeah.
They just kind of see the outside as, well, this is taking care of a problem. Obviously, there's a problem. We need to, take care of the kids. We need to take care of the parents, and they don't realize that this isn't, doing neither of that. So,
Yeah.
keep up the good work for sure.
All right. Well, we appreciate you, Ralph, and thank you for the work that you're doing to protect the motorcycle community.
Thanks, Ralph.
Yeah. Yep.
Have a good one.
Talk to you later. Bye.
He calls on the regular on that 9 a.m. Wednesday morning call.
Oh, very cool.
So that's the second time I got to talk to Ralph.
That's
That's pretty cool. All right. Well, thank you, Casey Crow, for sitting in with me today.
Thank you, Casey Whitener.
And we'll have Kev back with you hopefully tomorrow or sometime soon. I'll be back in tomorrow morning. The sports guys are coming up next. Thanks for being part of the Point family. We're grateful to you as listeners. Anything we can ever do for you, by all means, let us know. Have a great rest of your day.